Now, from CBS 4 News, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Good morning, I'm Rudabe Shabazi. Welcome to Facing South Florida. Jim DeFede is off this week. We begin with the plight of Puerto Ricans still reeling from Hurricane Maria. More than 9 months later, here we are again in hurricane season as the recovery inches along in Puerto Rico. And here in Florida, displaced Puerto Ricans getting help from FEMA's Transitional Shelter Assistance Program, or TSA, will need to seek help elsewhere. The program has just ended following a decision by the Puerto Rican government not to request an extension from FEMA. State Representative Robert Asensio is here with us this morning. He represents people who live in District 118 in Miami-Dade County and has just returned from his most recent trip to Puerto Rico. Nice to have you here. Welcome.
Good morning.
So first of all, I just want to ask, what is it like in Puerto Rico? A lot of people haven't been back since the storm or haven't been there at all. What were you seeing on the ground there?
So in the area of San Juan, a metropolitan city, you still see some trees down or some vegetation that's coming back to life, but life seems to be recovering. However, when you go out into the inner parts of the island, like these towns of Orocovi, Villalba, and Ay Bonito, you get a sense, especially from meeting with the mayors and the people on the ground, that they're very much still in recovery. There was some homes. As we drove into the first town of Orocovi, we passed over the bridge, and there was a little river. It looked like a little creek. Well, it was pointed out to us that that river had crested about well over 20 feet. And we saw it just on the shore bank, a house where the water had gone over the roof, and you see the tile still recovering. One of the interesting pieces was that as we drove past that bridge and we drove into more the interior of the island, the water pumps on the side of the road, the municipal water pumps, if you will, there were generators attached to them. So we went on to meet with the mayor, and the mayor pointed out to us that that night, the night of the 19th, it had rained. You know, just a little rain like we have here in South Florida on a regular basis, but yet the power, it was enough rain to knock out the power for over 12 hours.
And people actually, we had seen video of people actually trying to fix power lines themselves with absolutely no training because there was just nothing left for them to do. That was the state of desperation they had been in, and I know that a lot of the rural areas are still in that type of a state. You took video and pictures, correct?
Absolutely.
We can probably show those.
Absolutely.
I think we have them here, and you can kind of explain what it was you saw. But in the meantime, what is the government thinking in terms of being in hurricane season again this year? We're already in it, and are they prepared?
Well, there are a lot of apprehensions, and it depends on who you ask. Again, going to the inner part of the island, we met with 3 mayors, and they told us they're concerned. They don't think that the island's ready to sustain or support another massive hurricane event. There's a lot of concern. There's certainly a lot of concern. With regard to the power, you mentioned about the power. It was very interesting. We asked them, post-storm, right after the storm, how long were you without power? They said, well, they still have, in one of the towns, or several towns, they still have communities in the outer parts of the towns without power. And one of the things that they said, they themselves took it upon, again, themselves, to hire on contractors and people from their town to do the patchwork that was needed to bring back power.
So people still without power 9 months later.
That is correct. In
sweltering conditions. I mean, how are old people and people who are dependent on medical devices and young people who are vulnerable, how are they all coping with this?
With difficulty. Hence, it brings back the issue of the TSA, right? The TSA benefits that are about to end. You know, our reason for going over to the island was to assess, because the transitional shelter assistance ended, and it's what are the people going to do now? Are they going back to Puerto Rico? Well, the people that are here in the shelter program, a lot of them don't want to go back. We asked the mayors if the towns were ready to receive them. They say no. One of the mayors told us repeatedly, what are they coming back to? If they've left the town because their homes were blown away, or they sustained damage, or they have, medical conditions, and the power and the water is somewhat patchy, and the economic situation on the island, right? The jobs are scarce. Why would they want to come back?
Well, let's get to that. I mean, why did the Puerto Rican government decline to renew the program? It was really the decision of the Puerto Rican government not to seek further assistance for the TSA program from FEMA.
That's a good question. That's a good question. I would like to ask the governor of Puerto Rico. But I believe that, as I spoke to the Senate president on the second day of the trip, I asked him, are you ready to receive those people? And he says, well, depending on what part of the island, yes, we are. We will give, or we've asked FEMA to extend those benefits to here to the island. So those that come over, they will have benefits on the island. The only problem is, how do these people go back to an island? How do they reestablish their lives when they've left? Because, again, as I said previously, their homes are shattered, their jobs are lost. You know, schools. Mm-hmm. There's over 200 schools that have shut down because they've had that much of a loss of students. They've consolidated some of the schools. So if people were to go back, the evacuees, let's say, if the evacuees were to go back, that would cause another crisis, because as the schools are shut down, are they going to reopen them, and how quickly can they get them back online when some of these schools themselves have been sustained a lot of damage?
So do you foresee a lot of people staying here in Florida?
Yes.
And what is that going to do to Florida, to the demographics, politically, to the economy? Are they getting jobs here? Where are they going to live? What do you see happening?
Well, there are two types of people that have come. Those that are in the TSA program, and then those that have come over and they are self-sustained, they're already out working. But whether it's the ones that are on the program or not, my understanding is most of them are actually working. What does that do for the economy? Well, I think it's not a bad thing, because the more people we have working in the economy, the stronger our economy is. But what type of jobs are they going to? You know, we have an issue with affordable housing, right? Similar to what they have in Puerto Rico, we have a scarcity of housing. So what houses can they purchase or rent if they don't have the benefit of having the savings? Mm-hmm. And what it does is it creates a situation in Florida. Right before the storm hit, the night of the 19th, September 19th, I called Governor Scott and I asked him for two things. One, to prepare the state to receive those that were going to come, and use the state as a staging area to be able to launch benefit resources to the island, because we had just witnessed or gone through Irma. So we have power companies here. And my thought was, the quicker we on the mainland help our U.S. citizens in the Caribbean and in Puerto Rico to stabilize themselves, the better it'll be for us. Because people are that are in hardship areas, especially citizens, they're going to want to come to the mainland. And if they come to the mainland and we don't have the systems in place, whether housing, whether jobs, whether to integrate them immediately into schools, it's going to cause a problem. We already, like I said, witnessed and experienced the effects of Irma. We still have families in the Keys that are in the process of recovery, not just the Keys, but the western part of the state, where more of the effects of the storm hit. So we as lawmakers have to be very, very conscious of the policies that we put forth and what we require or request of our governors, leadership, right? In the way of managing these type of crises, because it's a delicate process. Now, as far as the political landscape, well, we'll see how these people are going to vote. I will tell you this much. On the island, there is a feeling that amongst the people we spoke to, I can't say for everybody, but amongst the people we spoke with, there's a feeling of discontent with the way the response was, or the response from the federal government to the island in the recovery process. As you mentioned, 9 months later, we're still in the process of power recovery. Towns haven't received funding from FEMA, the reimbursements. It's a long process, so there's a level of discontent. How that'll translate,
and not to mention the death toll. All the numbers on the death toll are vastly different. There's so much more I wish we could get to, but we appreciate having you here today and being a voice for the Puerto Ricans who are still recovering on the island. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next on Facing South Florida, President Donald Trump's travel ban upheld. We'll take a look at what it means and have reaction when we come back.